California task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Content warning. It contains discussions of racial discrimination, sexual assault, torture, lynching, and other forms of extreme violence. Contains unedited historical quotations and photographs of white supremacist hatred, torture, lynching, autopsy, and other forms of graphic violence.
The welfare system. Assistance to families. Despite the consistent arguments of politicians in the 1980s and 1990s stereotyping African Americans as unfairly taking advantage of government welfare policies, the American welfare system throughout history has actually discriminated against black women and families, explicitly and implicitly. 1900 to 1935. State, mothers' pensions. States across America developed centralized welfare systems in the early 1900s to provide economic aid to low-income single mothers taking care of their children. 194 states made support payments every month to ensure a basic standard of living to care for both mother and child. 195 by 1930, all but 2 of the 48 existing states had created these mothers' pensions. 96. Throughout the era of mothers' pensions, Southern states consistently avoided giving aid to single black mothers. 197 These policies discriminated against black mothers, despite their greater economic need on average. 198 This approach was in line with Southern state officials' administration of federal public works programs. Such officials generally argued that African Americans should not need or be given relief so long as menial jobs were available to them. 199 Research has shown that between 1910 and 1920, the states in the South that enacted no mothers' pensions were those with greatest percentage of black single mothers. 100 Similarly, states that had higher black single motherhood rates were slower to enact such pensions and or less generous with them when they were enacted. 201 Both northern and southern states also implemented standards that disproportionately disqualified black, such as barring unmarried mothers from receiving benefits. 202 Many states across the nation only gave mothers' pensions to widows, thereby excluding unmarried mothers who were more often black women. 103 Even nominally race-neutral programs were often racist in their administration. Discretion in administering these programs was often left to line officials, as well as county agencies, who made decisions to separate the worthy mothers from the unworthy and about whether to provide benefits at all. 4. American Family Living in Crowded Quarters, Chicago, Illinois. 1941. Russell Lee, Library of Congress. Chapter 8 Pathologizing Black Families. Field supervisor in the 1930s explained that the withholding of welfare payments from black mothers was to prevent them from staying at home caring for their children and to instead force them into the workplace. 5. This reflected the attitude of the white community that black women should be forced to continue engaging in seasonal labor jobs or domestic service rather than receive any aid. 206. Survey of all mothers' pensions across states in 1931 found that 96% of recipients were white, only 3% went to black mothers. 107 All the states of the Deep South, Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas, created mothers' pension programs but provided almost no assistance to black single mothers. Across these 7 states in 1931, only 39 black families received mothers' pensions, compared to 2,957 white families. 208. 1935 to the present. Federal aid to dependent children and modern welfare. In 1935, the federal government passed the Social Security Act, which created a federal program similar to the state mothers' pensions known as Aid to Dependent Children. Named Aid to Families with Dependent Children. 109 In the 1950s, the federal government established payment programs to help poor Americans, but these programs were administered by state government agents who often denied welfare benefits to black families by claiming that their homes were immoral because children were born out of wedlock. 210 For example, in 1960 the Louisiana government removed 23,000 children from its state welfare rolls solely because their parents were not married, which was more likely to be the case among black families. 211 Response: the federal government prohibited states from denying welfare benefits solely because a child was born to unmarried parents. required them to decide on a case-by-case basis whether a family was unsuitable for welfare and to provide service interventions to such families. 212 Although the intent of this rule, which became known as Fleming Rule, was states from excluding families from welfare assistance by applying broad and often arbitrary rules to all recipients, the effect was to push more black children into foster care. 13 state welfare officials investigated black families to consider whether to remove their children, often simply because the family was poor. 14 Again, scholars have noted that these policies were in many ways a modern-day continuation of the apprenticeship process of removing black children from their low-income families. 215 In 1960 in Florida, the largely white state welfare worker staff investigated and challenged the suitability of approximately 13,000 families already receiving welfare assistance. 16 of these 13,000 families, only 9% were white, even though welfare recipients as a whole were 39% white. 217 The state of Florida forced these 13,000 families to choose between their children or their welfare benefits. 18 Based on the racist beliefs that black women had little maternal connection to their children, state workers expressed surprise that only 168 families agreed to place their children in state care. 119 In modern times, the welfare system of cash assistance has remained biased against African Americans. 1996, as part of a public movement against so-called welfare moms, Congress passed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, which created the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families Program, a system of federal funds sent to the states. 20 This system awards fixed dollar amounts to each state, but allows them to spend that money how they see fit to achieve federal goals. 21 Those goals include, but are not limited to, providing cash assistance to needy families and ending the dependence of needy parents on government benefits. 222 System has allowed states to craft policies that determine who is eligible for assistance, and these state policies tend to disqualify black families from receiving cash assistance at a higher rate than other racial and ethnic groups. 123 For example, 7 states have policies that completely ban individuals with any drug-related convictions from eligibility for cash assistance. 24 As discussed in Chapter 11, An Unjust Legal System, black individuals are much more likely than white individuals to be convicted of drug offenses due to discrimination in the criminal justice system. 125 Therefore, these restrictions are more likely to burden poor African Americans. Similarly, 11 states still maintain family cap policies that originated in welfare mom stereotypes, which deny benefit increases when welfare recipients have another child, and which have disproportionate impacts on black families that tend to be larger than white families. 227 Their notable change has emerged in very recent times. Law gives states the power to spend federal money on programs other than direct cash assistance. States are motivated to minimize cash assistance so they can spend more on other programs that might otherwise drain state coffers. 28 Over the past 20 years, there has been a dramatic reduction in the percentage of federal money spent on cash assistance. 97.71% of federal money was spent on welfare benefits nationwide, whereas in 2019 states spent only 21% of their federal money on such benefits. 29 Again, African Americans are more likely to suffer from this change, as larger percentages of black residents have tended to spend the least percentage of their federal funds on welfare benefits. 30. Yeah. California provided mothers' pensions solely to widows, and was thus more likely to give these benefits to white single mothers because of the greater percentage of unwed black mothers. 131 Moreover, the racist stereotype of welfare queen was arguably popularized by then California Governor Ronald Reagan in 1976, who ran for president in part on a promise to cut welfare benefits, as he had done as governor of California. 32 Currently, California spends a greater percentage of its federal temporary assistance to needy families funds on basic assistance than most other states in the nation. 33 However, that percentage has reduced from 51% in 2009 to 39% in 2020. 34 Advocates and academics note that these reductions disproportionately harm black families. 235